Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise from your sources, aiming for, crystal clear insights.
Exactly.
Today, we're really digging into the headlines of June 16th, 2025. It's just one day, but wow, it gives such a snapshot of a world, well, grappling with a lot.
It really does. Escalating conflicts, big political shifts at home, major stuff happening in tech and finance.
Yeah, it's all there. And our job today, as always, is to pull apart those threads, connect the dots for you.
And show why these stories, even if they seem far away, really matter.
We've got a stack of interesting stuff here. Articles, reports, even some internal notes, all focused just on June 16th.
We'll be looking at the Israel-Iran situation, obviously, and how that shakes out in the markets.
Plus some pretty startling things happening domestically.
And even how AI, specifically its massive energy use, is starting to shape international policy. It's quite a mix.
Okay, let's start with that big global flashpoint then. Israel and Iran. Our sources show a pretty complex and, honestly, kind of alarming picture for June 16th. Both sides took major actions.
They really did. What jumps out is the simultaneous escalation. It wasn't just one side acting.
Right. So from one angle, sources say Israel expanded its airstrikes significantly.
Yeah, not just military targets anymore. They went after Iranian internal security institutions, even social control centers.
In Netanyahu's language, calling the government very weak, hinting he might even target the supreme leader. That feels like a big shift.
It does. And then you have Israeli officials confirming, quote, full and complete coordination with the U.S. on these attacks.
Which explains the USS Nimitz strike group moving in, the extra tankers. It signals this isn't just contained, is it?
Not at all. It screams wider involvement. But then Iran didn't just sit back.
No, definitely not. On the very same day, they launched Operation True Promise 3. Another big barrage of missiles and drones aimed at Israel.
Hitting major cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, causing real damage to civilian infrastructure, a school, homes.
And tragically, 5 deaths reported, over 90 injuries in central Israel. Fragments even hit the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv.
And Iran was sending diplomatic signals too, threats towards U.S., U.K., French bases. It's a multi-pronged approach.
So Israel says it's about defense, stopping nuclear ambitions. Iran says it's retaliation. They even executed an alleged Israeli spy around this time.
This tit for tat, with both sides hitting harder, it just highlights the huge risk of a bigger regional war breaking out. It feels like it's right on the edge.
Absolutely. Which makes the next piece really interesting. How did the financial markets react? You'd expect panic.
I really would. But that's the fascinating part. Despite all this fresh hostility, global stock markets were surprisingly steady on June 16th.
Steady's putting it mildly. U.S. stocks, the Dow included, actually went up.
Yeah, and oil prices, which had spiked, actually eased back a bit. Some sources tied that to maybe hopes for a truce, however unlikely that seemed.
It seems almost disconnected from the reality on the ground.
Well, it suggests investors were maybe cautiously optimistic, or perhaps just hoping it wouldn't spiral completely out of control. We even saw tech stocks doing well. Cisco jumped 18% after an upgrade.
Right. And domestically, President Trump approved that big Nippon Steel deal for U.S. Steel. So business moving forward despite the global tension.
It shows this weird mix, doesn't it? High geopolitical risk, but markets sort of holding their breath, maybe? Analysts were definitely warning about how fragile that calm was.
Yeah, you can't ignore those warnings. And, while the Middle East grabs the headlines, we can't forget Eastern Europe.
Definitely not. Russia really intensified its attacks on Ukraine on June 16th. A major nighttime assault on Kyiv.
With missiles and drones focused on residential areas while people were sleeping. Just awful. Sources say at least 15 killed, over 130 injured.
It's a tragic reminder of that ongoing conflict and the broader instability, and it ties into challenges for Western alliances, too.
Especially with that G7 summit disruption, right? President Trump leaving early.
Exactly. Canceling planned meetings with Zelensky and Mexico's President Sheinbaum, that sent signals,
Understandably, Ukrainian officials were making urgent appeals for more aid, military, humanitarian, warning about infrastructure and civilian safety.
It's a tough situation all around.
Okay, let's shift focus now back home to the U.S. A really alarming story out of Minnesota on June 16th.
Yeah, that one was deeply disturbing. A series of shootings.
Resulting in the assassination of a Democratic state lawmaker, Melissa Hortman, and her husband. And another state senator, John Hoffman, and his wife were wounded.
Just terrible. And the details that came out later, the suspect, Vance Bolter, caught after a manhunt.
Apparently disguised himself as a police officer.
Yeah. And authorities found what they called a hit list on him, around 70 names, other lawmakers, Planned Parenthood centers.
Flyers for No Kings rallies
Right.
were also found, which led to those protests being canceled. It's chilling.
Sources describe Bolter as a Trump supporter, long opposed to abortion and LGBTQ rights.
Which immediately fuels these huge debates about political extremism, domestic terrorism. The condemnation was widespread across the political spectrum.
And renewed calls for better security for public officials, which is completely understandable. It really makes you think about the political climate, doesn't it?
It really does. The fear is palpable. You hear it from lawmakers, advocacy groups. It hit hard.
No doubt. And speaking of U.S. politics, the Trump administration was making other big waves on June 16th.
Right. Our sources covered several major moves.
Yeah, President Trump threatened what he called the single largest mass deportation program in history.
Ordering ICE to ramp up raids in big cities, L.A., Chicago, New York, targeting, in his words, the core of the Democrat power center.
And connected to that, the administration was looking at expanding the travel ban. Another 36 countries, possibly including allies like Egypt, some African nations.
Predictably, huge outcry from immigrant advocates, civil rights groups. They're calling the policies discriminatory, saying it hurts America's standing globally.
But interestingly, there was also pushback from business leaders and some lawmakers, too.
Worried about the economy, right?
Right.
Especially raids hitting farms, hotels, restaurants.
Exactly. Citing potential economic disruption, it just highlights how immigration policy remains this central, really polarizing issue in 2025. That constant tension between political goals and, economic or humanitarian impacts.
It's a constant balancing act, or maybe a constant conflict.
Feels that way sometimes.
And then, on a completely different note, but still involving the Trump name, Trump Mobile.
Ah, yes. Unveiled on June 16th. A new venture planning to launch soon, August 2025.
With a gold-colored phone, the T1, for $499.
In a monthly plan around $47, aiming to bundle telehealth and international calls. It runs on the existing networks, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile.
It's another diversification for the Trump brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
After crypto, real estate, now wireless.
Tapping into a crowded market, but adding that telehealth angle is interesting. That's a growing field. It fits the America First branding.
But you have to wonder about regulatory scrutiny, right? When the brand and politics are so intertwined.
Always a question mark there. That entanglement definitely adds complexity.
Okay, let's hop across the pond. Some notable UK updates, also from June 16th.
Right. There was that statutory report from Baroness Casey about grooming gangs.
Publicly naming ethnicity as a significant factor. That's been a really controversial topic for a long time. Crime, community tensions, policing.
Yeah, that report is bound to stir up a lot of debate, politically and socially. Could lead to changes in policy, policing reforms, but it's sensitive stuff.
On a different note, we saw the Princess of Wales back in public.
Yes, at Windsor's Order of the Garter Service. Her first big appearance after her cancer treatment hiatus. A significant moment for her recovery and, got a lot of attention.
Definitely. And then infrastructure news. The government approved nearly $600 million for the Lower Thames crossing.
A big tunnel project aiming for completion around 2032. Strategic move to ease traffic congestion down there.
And finally, a leadership change. Blaise Metrooli appointed as the new head of MI6, taking over from Sir Richard Moore.
Which could signal shifts in British intelligence strategy down the line. You always watch those leadership changes closely.
So yeah, a real mix from the UK social issues, royal news, infrastructure, intelligence. A busy day there, too.
It shows how many different things are constantly developing, even in one country on one day.
Okay, let's pivot now to more future-focused topics that were discussed on June 16th, starting with AI's energy problem.
Yes, the energy demands. Huge issue. There was a private summit, ENET-CT, held in Washington.
Hosted by, UAE entities XRG, backed by their national oil company ADNOC, and MGX, a tech investor, plus the Atlantic Council.
And they brought together the big players, right? Energy giants like Exxon, BP, Constellation, AI leaders like OpenAI, even folks from the U.S. Department of Energy.
All trying to figure out how to manage AI's skyrocketing energy needs.
The core question is, how do you balance this incredible tech advancement with, sustainability? It's a massive challenge.
Exactly. The goal of the summit was to come up with actual, actionable policy ideas, not just talk.
Things like energy standards for AI, maybe? More investment in grids, renewables. Closer ties between the tech and energy sectors.
Those kinds of outcomes could really shape climate policy globally. UAE officials were stressing how linked AI and energy are.
While environmental groups were saying, hang on, we need stronger regulation here to make sure this growth is actually responsible, it's a critical conversation.
Definitely one to watch. And related, in a way, is the impact of U.S.-China tensions on science and tech.
Yeah, that was also in the news on June 16th. The U.S. was considering changes to visas for Chinese students.
Part of the ongoing trade talks, but also driven by concerns about tech transfer, national security.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio signaled a tougher line, potentially revoking more visas for Chinese nationals in sensitive research fields, citing espionage worries.
And at the same time, the White House was looking at freezing over $30 billion in spending at agencies like the NSF and NASA.
Which raises big questions about the future of American scientific leadership, if you cut funding.
It's this complex mix of science, education, geopolitics, could have really long-term effects on research, innovation, international teamwork.
And just add another layer, the National Institutes of Health actually reversed a controversial policy around that time.
Oh, right. The one about anti-DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and academic boycotts.
Yeah, it shows these ongoing debates even within the science community about diversity, values, and how funding works. Lots of push and pull there.
Okay, and finally, let's not forget the power of nature. It was making headlines, too, on June 16th.
Sadly, yes. Severe flash flooding in West Virginia, really devastating.
At least 6 deaths reported. Part of an apartment building collapsed. Just widespread destruction.
And it wasn't isolated. 12 million Americans across the Midwest and Appalachia were under flood watches or warnings that day.
Just brings those debates about infrastructure, climate change, resilience right back to the forefront, doesn't it? These extreme events seem more and more common.
They really do. And it wasn't just the U.S. Across the water in England.
30,000 lightning strikes overnight, along with flooding and storm damage there, too.
It underscores how global these challenges are. And yet, despite all this, the conflicts, the weather, the Paris Air Show opened.
Yeah, at Le Bourget, a huge event for the aerospace industry, right in the middle of all these rising geopolitical tensions.
Which just shows how interconnected everything is. What happens in the Middle East, for instance, could directly impact billion-dollar deals being made at that air show. It all ripples outwards.
Before we wrap this up, there were a few other significant headlines from June 16th we should probably mention, just to paint the full picture.
Good idea. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continued to worsen. Over 30 people reported killed at food aid sites.
A UN official called the Israeli warfare there horrifying. And we saw massive solidarity marches for Gaza across Europe and South America. The Gaza Freedom Flotilla was also active.
Elsewhere, tragically, the death toll from that attack by gunmen in north-central Nigeria hit 150. Just awful violence.
And back in the U.S., in New York City, early voting started for the mayoral race.
Yeah, a pretty heated Democratic primary shaping up between Progressive Assembly member Zoran Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Cuomo trying for a political comeback after resigning back in 2021 over those sexual harassment allegations. That's one to watch.
Definitely. And finally, over in India, the central bank cut its key interest rate, the repo rate, by 0.5%.
Which led major banks there to cut rates on savings accounts.
Right. The idea is to boost borrowing and growth, but the flip side is lower returns for savers, especially retirees, people who are risk-averse.
So it could push more money into stocks and bonds, but maybe hurt household income growth and, widen the wealth gap. Always trade-offs with monetary policy.
Always.
So stepping back and looking at June 16, 2025, it really wasn't just another day, was it?
Not at all. It felt like a moment where global conflicts really sharpened, domestic political lines got clearer, maybe starker.
And those big long-term challenges, climate, technology, they just kept unfolding right in front of us.
Yeah, that interconnectedness is, I think, the main takeaway. How a drone strike somewhere can affect oil prices everywhere. How AI's need for power suddenly becomes a matter of national policy.
It's about seeing that whole web, isn't it? How all this information fits together, shapes the world you're living in.
It's a lot to process, even from just one day's news. So many threads.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads to a final thought, maybe for you, the listener.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world moving this fast, with so much information, sometimes conflicting, how do you personally sort through it all? How do you figure out what really matters and what it means for your life for the future?
Something to think about. We hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture, maybe a more nuanced view of that pivotal day. Join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the stories that matter most to you.